real quick. And I'm going to hit play. Okay, everybody should be able to see the screen. Sorry, my printer just decided to be possessed and print. So my name is Ryan Schaffen. I'm Associate Professor of Educational Technology in the School of Education. I helped many of you with the Ed TPA course, trying to get those videos in compliance for submission, and I may have taught some of you. It's been a while since I've actually taught 556 or 300, but I know a few of you from other courses that I've taught. So just a little bit of a background. So I teach a lot of workshops and a lot of professional development to teachers that are currently in the classroom, and also prospective teachers like yourselves. I know a lot of you already have jobs, and I know that you are currently interning or student teaching or just extremely busy. So I do appreciate your time. As I mentioned before, I have to actually take my son to a soccer game at the leave here at 7 to be there by 7:20. So I try to time this just right. But I'm going to go ahead and get started. So it is recording in the background. I'll make sure to upload this. If a colleague is not able to make it tonight, I'll make sure that I provide it for them to see at a later time. So when the pandemic hit in February, March of 2020, I was asked to help people through guiding them into doing this kind of distance learning situation, remote learning, whatever you want to call it. I had to do a lot for the university professors. I had to do a lot for professional development for all of the different school districts. Different private schools asked me. So I tried my best to take what I knew and trying to create something where there's a lot of takeaways and a lot of advice that you could use practical. Now, you might be saying, well, Ryan, the pandemic is over. No, I don't really need this. No, actually, you don't. You actually really do. And let me explain the relevance of this. In February of 2020, probably about 90% of teachers didn't know how to teach a synchronous session online. It's actually over 90%. Most teachers didn't know how to use Zoom or Google, or Microsoft Teams or Google Meets. And what happens is, within 1 month, everybody was like, we are scrambling for tools, we're scrambling for resources. How are we supposed to serve our students? So it really is still relevant. I know that COVID, we're starting to see a little bit of a break, but unfortunately, it's still around. And even though people are saying, well, there's going to constantly be being these breakouts, and there might be periods where we have to go online for a little while. So we don't know what we don't know. So it's best to prepare for using these different technologies and resources. And a lot of the school districts have now opened up their own digital education centers, because a lot of kids actually flourished during the pandemic because they didn't have to deal with that type of social anxiety of high school or middle school. They actually flourished. So every county, or I should say most counties, have actually opened up some sort of digital education center. So it's still very much valid and still used today. So I tried to craft a workshop, or in an hour, it's going to be, I'm going to try and go through this and give you as many strategies and resources as possible. So an hour I created this. It's called Being Close at a Distance: Remote Learning During and After COVID-19. So I am going to get started here. So before, I just want to let you know, I do have a new book available. It's called Literacy Still Not Enough, and it kind of goes through next generation modern day skills. If you're a big proponent of project-based learning, problem-based learning, inquiry-based learning, and just teaching your students next generation learning skills, this may be a book of interest to you. It's a little bit of instructional design. It is lesson planning. It is taking all these really big ideas and crafting them to where it helps with real-world application, problem solving, communication, creativity, collaboration, and also information fluency, all the different information that's out there. So if you're interested, by all means, consider taking a look. I know it has a free preview online. So it's called Literacy Still Not Enough. It is a follow-up from a an education bestseller. Okay, I also want to, if you want more resources, tools, free guides, you're also able to go to ryanschoff.com and grab them. I'll put that up in the chat box in just a minute. I'm trying to create a newsletter to where I can kind of articulate or share tools, articulate really good articles and suggestions and strategies for you. And then you can take a look at different books and other resources that are free. You can take a look at some free resources as well. And you can also, of course, sign up for the newsletter and take a look. Okay, so let's get going. So I want to start off by talking about what exactly happened during the pandemic. So during this pandemic that we're starting to see kind of like we're starting to come out on the other end now that we have a vaccine, a lot of the population's being vaccinated. The schools are starting to slowly turn back. I don't want to say to normal, but we're starting to try and bounce back to the way it was before the pandemic. During the pandemic, teachers were the glue to society. Of course, we had the brave doctors, nurses, and frontline workers who combated the virus, but teachers also never left their posts. They, despite being scared for themselves and their families, despite many lacking essential tools and training to shift to 100% online learning, despite this so-called new normal, they provided the best instruction they could. Luckily, the digital generation are made for this. This entire situation hit home for myself and my wife. That's Connor, 12. He's now 14, and Ben is 6. Now he's almost, he'll be 8 in July. So our new normal wasn't normal. There's their school outfits, their pajamas. My children, along with many others, had to abandon the physical school building they loved. They were unable to visit friends or extended family. They had to share a home with 2 working adults during a global crisis. And they had to do this with the uncertainty of their continued health and well-being. Our boys were lucky. Many families in the world weren't as fortunate. So just by the numbers, globally, 1.5 billion students, over 87% had their schools closed. In the US, most of the 55 million K-12 students were sent home, not to physically step back into schools again for practically 18 months. Individual school systems were left on their own to offer instruction at a distance. Schools were forced to perform a monumental pivot and discovered it wasn't easy to go virtual. Lack of teacher training, the digital divide, lack of accessible tools, lack of instructional or planning time, high teacher anxiety, and mass unemployment created a difficult environment for success. As amazing as teachers are, they felt disconnected from their students in the classrooms. The sound of the opening bell, the smiles on their students' faces, and the very aura of the brick and mortar classrooms were replaced by packets of worksheets, connection errors, and the ding sound once a student joins your Zoom or Teams or Meets class, the mute icon, and the black screens. In the spring, parents and politicians were furious and believed distance and online learning doesn't work. In truth, though, what parents and students received wasn't true distance education. It was called triaged learning. Look, the system of education hasn't dramatically changed in over 150 years. Before the Civil Rights Act, before women could vote, before the first airplane lifted off the ground at Kitty Hawk, the education system as we know it was structured to produce factory workers and individuals working routine cognitive jobs. I am sorry, but a long-standing and inflexible system such as education will take time to change. Unfortunately, we do not have time to stop and overhaul our outdated education system. As educators, we are here to serve. Although the pandemic is waning in many areas, COVID is still a reality. We have learners that were separated from their friends and had to deal with everything being shut down and canceled. They were stuck at home going through their own trauma. We call it the new normal. Unfortunately, there's nothing normal about it. Physical schools are more than just classrooms and hallways. They are spaces where students would enter and feel like they belong to a learning community, surrounded by their friends and teachers. Although our school buildings are open again, the after effects are still causing mayhem. We have schools being short-staffed. We have teacher burnout and a student population still feeling the effects of their normal being stripped away from them for close to 2 years, and it has created new challenges to overcome. In a single academic day, students could read about exciting topics, write imaginative stories, create a model out of clay, produce a video about climate change, sing their little hearts out, and learn about far-off places that existed a long time ago. Online, it was hard to engage and motivate them to even show up. When they show up, it is hard to keep them interested. Many educators felt like they were going into this situation handcuffed. Get ready for the first takeaway from our time together. You have the power and the authority to connect with your learners at a distance. You can be the reason they turn on their cameras and unmute their microphones. You can be the reason why they re-engage in the classroom again. We are here to explore how you, as educators, can connect with your learners at a distance. Engagement and motivation. These can be characteristics of distance learning if we challenge our mindsets and look at the situation as a way to transform learning experiences forever. First, I'm going to offer you a big idea that will serve you as guidance throughout these uncertain times. Next, I'm going to share strategies aligned to these big ideas to engage, motivate, and inspire your learners. Okay. At numerous points, I'm going to turn over our time together to you. You can fill the chat box with ideas, raise your hands to share ideas, ask questions, express your reflections. I'll let you know, you'll see that screen when it comes up. So first, you are amazing educators, okay? However, you are not Wonder Woman nor Superman. You do not have superhuman powers that allow you to click your fingers and make everything work out. Before the pandemic, educators had a tough enough job. Now they are being asked to sacrifice their time and well-being to support their students. Grinding through these past 2 years during the pandemic has been taxing. Make sure to take time to unplug and get away from your time as your student's hero. Too much screen time isn't good for educators as well as students. Hold yourself to a manageable working schedule in order to live your life. According to a 2018 study, more than 44% of new teachers leave the profession within the first 5 years, citing burnout and a lack of pay and help. The pandemic has only exacerbated the situation. We have the Great Resignation now going on, where a lot of people aren't returning back to their jobs in the modern workforce. And the teaching profession is one of the professions that are hit the hardest. Make sure that you're engaging in hobbies and passions to feed your soul. Partner with others to plan instruction and get help when you need it. You cannot engage or motivate your learners when you are on the brink of burnout. So please take that advice throughout your entire career. Make sure you manage your stress level and your burnout. Okay. Next, the biggest takeaway from today should be that digital is different. Just because you have a synchronous session plan does not mean it will progress at the same rate and pace as a face-to-face instructional class. The important content, concepts, and skills can be introduced before you even meet for your synchronous sessions. The main goal for these sessions is community building, social learning, real-time conversations, collaboration, and real-time feedback. So my biggest suggestion is try to create a routine schedule. Okay, create a schedule for the meeting times, like 5 minutes opening and greeting and celebration. And again, this can work both in a face-to-face and online format. Try to plan for a 5 to 10 minute warm-up task, 5 to 10 minutes of a micro lecture. You don't want to over lecture. 25 minutes of collaboration, discussion, guided and independent practice, and 10 minutes of closure and exit messages to students. You want to share instructional resources before the live session. This way they can get to it. They can make sure to try and connect with whatever resource you're trying to get them to connect with. And if there's a problem, maybe you can even technically work through it before you meet with them. Use this strategy, allows the session to be more application and hands-on rather than just based on a lecture. You can also bring other digital tools into the session, such as Google Forms, Docs, Pear Deck, and Padlet, just to make it more interactive. Making a human connection is challenging when all you see is a small camera window and hear a digitized voice on the other end. Student engagement is valuable since it is so labored in an online synchronous class. Every face-to-face class, every Zoom, Teams, or Meet session should involve talking to each student about a topic that is meaningful to them. Do not dismiss this as non-productive. Building relationships should be the top priority. Don't worry, the curriculum will come, but building those relationships will offer this type of powerful connection with your learners. So make sure you're constantly building relationships. And by providing your students a voice and demonstrating interest in them beyond academics, you can start to develop an authentic connection, in person or at a distance. Some suggestion: conduct interest surveys and polls to uncover what your students like and dislike. Educators can use Google Forms, Microsoft Forms, even the poll features in Zoom to collect interest data from your students to use in the future. In traditional classrooms, scientist Dr. Brophy observed that even if a teacher praises a child once every 5 minutes, the rate of praise for the average student would be once every 2 hours. That just won't cut it. As students enter the classroom, either physical or virtual, after making your greetings, ask them a question and listen to their response. Engage in these short micro chats. Likewise, as you sign off your synchronous session or as they're leaving the classroom, don't shut down the meeting or kind of close down the lesson all at once. Release students one by one after providing them with a short goodbye, words of encouragement, feedback, or just a final thought. Encourage your learners to use the chat feature. A discussion on chat room etiquette is, of course, essential, but having a back channel or a space during your synchronous session is awesome. And I know there's this constant feedback, well, this county won't let you, or this or that and the other. Find ways to where your students can connect and communicate and collaborate, especially when it comes to online instruction, because they are at a distance. They feel isolated and alone. If you are in a face-to-face situation, anytime they can collaborate and communicate and talk with one another is valuable time. Also, and this is a very simple one, even for your high schoolers, try to sporadically plan for times for them to show and tell about events for students to share any cool projects, news, anything that they have that they're working on, or some sort of awesome experience. This helps to build those relationships and you get to know the learner even better. Okay. So despite the long-standing tradition of doing just this, our job as educators is not to mute learners and show them how smart we are. Rather, our job is to empower our learners to become independent thinkers and doers. In an online learning environment, when educators feel the need to lecture, they should keep it short. What should take up all the time are your students thinking, discussing, and doing. Strategies to encourage less talk and more questioning includes avoiding the long form lectures. Instead, create what I call micro lectures. These are 5 to 10 minutes in length. Attention spans kind of falter after about 5 to 10 minutes. You really need to get them to do things so this way they can stay active and engaged. Prepare a list of questions to ask. Do not try to come up with questions on the fly. No matter how great you are at questioning techniques and line, if sometimes on the just in this coming up with things just on the on a moment's notice, a lot of times you can just blank out and not come up with good questions, or you'll ask very superficial questions. You want to ask those deep questions. The best thing to do is to come up with those list of questions beforehand. And of course, you want to constantly be using these question and answer sessions to kind of dig deeper into subjects, topics, etc. You probably heard of Socratic Seminar. They are a lot of fun, and there's not a lot of rules to them. As long as the students are doing most of the questions, most of the talking, then you know that you're doing it right. And encourage students to ask and answer each other's questions in the chat feature as well. Of course, you could also use breakout room discussions, jigsaw activities, and of course, what they used to call hot potato, where you go back and forth and you kind of answer questions until the time is up. It's a great way for engagement, even online, where we feel like we're kind of isolated. Okay, at this point, I am going to open it up to any ideas. Is there an idea that you have that I shared that might be interesting, something that you've tried in the classroom that worked, or just a reflection? I'm going to go ahead and let you all unmute and talk for a change. If you don't feel like hearing your voice, or you taught all day and your voice is tired, go ahead and go into the chat box. You're more than welcome to type in there. I'm going to open it up for a 2-minute sharing session. So do we have any ideas that really have kind of suggestions I've given you? Sandy and David, sorry.
Yeah, my husband. Well, I had younger students during the pandemic, actually first graders, and a lot of them had 28, half in class and half online. And it really, they did beautifully, really. They worked very hard. One thing I realized was they needed a lot of wait time and a lot of prep time. So I would give them a question. If I thought something was going to be challenging and really wanted them to think about it, I would give them something to think about, you know, over the course of the evening as homework, and to come back and be able to discuss it. And I found that their answers were a lot more thoughtful and that they were more engaged. And it was, I think, much more student-centered than teacher-driven, as it were.
Sandy, it's absolutely, we need thinking and processing time. And by framing it for that, because, you know, kids that age, they really want to, they're excited. They really want to help. They really want to, they really want to participate. But sometimes they'll blur out something that they take a microsecond to think about. If you want those deeper connections, give them that think time. It's absolutely valuable. So Sandy, my kudos to you. And that was a great strategy. Anybody else would like to unmute and share?
In the chat, Edith said that some schools have team groups that are planning, even virtually, to support one another, less burnout. And Jamie said, whoops, everybody's going quickly. That's good. Let me jump to Val. We used, oh yeah, look it, so much more fun than Kahoot. Padlet was a great way to get everyone's input, and it looks like high school level tools like Kahoot and Booklet. These kids are old enough to set the screen for those.
And I'm going to give you a couple more tools and resources to consider using. But yeah, Kahoot, Booklet, there's a lot of these tools that come up and they become really popular. And just, yeah, Jamboard, absolutely. Once you get that pretty much squared away, a lot of people will use Jamboard. Anytime they can kind of get into that shared space and share and collaborate, it becomes almost magical. We used to use, you know, Google Docs. We used to use Google Sheets, and also collaboratively, I used to use, my goodness, just a sub-ether edit, which was basically just going on the same document and people typing in a space. And it was, I call it blissful productivity. It was just great. And Joanna mentioned breakout rooms. Now listen, some school districts are going to have different policies when it comes to breakout rooms. But a lot of times when people think about power and like one kid may have made a mistake, you typically have that whole thing. Oh, as soon as something doesn't work or something bad happens, we shut things down. We don't give our students the power or, you know, the responsibility to do something and to take responsibility for their actions. Try not to cut off those types of privileges and, you know, places for empowerment when it comes to students. Anytime we can give them agency and control, that is where it's valuable. Amber, you're here, I promise. Amber's here. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Yeah, whiteboard.fi is a free whiteboard Nearpod. Everybody's just putting all their great tools in here. And here's the thing is, like, you know, you're like, well, Ryan, what tool do you suggest? There's lots of tools to use. And it's really up to your county or your school, whatever those recommended resources are. please take a look at them, use them, experience them. If you don't know how to use them, go on YouTube and figure out watch a quick tutorial. A lot of times these tools are meant to be picked up and used very quickly. So don't be nervous. I think B Falco, is that Beth? Is that a Beth Falco?
Yes. Yes.
Go ahead, Beth. You're more than welcome. And then Amy, and then Stacy.
Yeah, what you kind of touched on what I was gonna say is that with the collaborative documents, and one thing that we found is the students, like all these other places to go were good, but sometimes the technology, like if they didn't have a good internet connection, it was really hard to open up other apps and have other things running, especially I'm in Calvert, in our county, we didn't always have the best internet for some of our students. So using our Schoology or our Teams that they had to be in anyways, sometimes was the easiest. And we found under, I haven't used it since last year, but if you go under like a tab in Teams, and we just loaded a Word document and we gave each of the students a square, and we post a question up there, and it became a collaborative document. And just kind of sometimes the simplest things work the best. And going back to the same thing over. And it worked really well because I'm in middle school and we had a hard time getting the middle schoolers to speak up. But they usually, as long as we can get them there and find their way over, they usually would collaborate on that document.
And Beth, another idea is you can actually give them the responsibility to take their own notes, as in do that as a collaborative say, listen, I'm going to give 2 or 3 people, you all are responsible for these notes. And it takes the power off of you. I won't say it takes the power away from you, but it takes the responsibility away from you, because you may have students that are absent or sick and they need the notes that they've missed. Those collaborative notes become absolutely crucial and vital. And you can simply just hit a share button. It makes life easier, trying to work simpler. But thank you, Beth. Excellent. Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say less on the instructional end, but I teach special ed, and this might work mostly because I have a smaller class size, but during virtual learning, I quickly realized that for some of those more community building things that we would do, like a social question kind of thing, or conversation, different stuff like that, or show and tell, it was actually really helpful to keep all of my students or to take them off of mute, so that and sometimes that could be distracting because you can hear everything, but normally in the actual classroom, it's not completely silent when you're sharing, and some of those really small parts of just people giving an or a yes, just small little affirmations really, I think, encouraged a lot of other students to feel more comfortable sharing, because then they could hear their peers agreeing with them or being oh wow, I did the same thing, without it having to be oh, you unmute, okay, now you can it was a little bit more natural. So that was just a small way that really helped, I think, make my class feel a little more comfortable with that kind of stuff.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. And so there is in fact, I'll talk about it in a minute. There is a phenomenon called Zoom fatigue. And if you've ever been on Zoom for, over an hour, 75 minutes, you will feel it. We are used to speaking to people in a face-to-face dynamic. We're used to the nonverbal, because we actually communicate very much through nonverbal. In fact, if we have any TESOL teachers in here right now, they'll probably say, yeah, he's right. A lot of the nonverbal cues that we receive, we don't really pick those up as well when we're online in a synchronous session. So it becomes very taxing for the brain, to where, if you're on Zoom for over 2 hours, you feel it. It feels like you are almost have a Zoom hangover. But it's called Zoom fatigue, and it is real. So a lot of times when I try to fashion these types of online learning experiences, I'll have people go on and off of Zoom. They'll do something offline temporarily and come back. Don't feel like you're shortchanging your students, because that's probably going to end up benefiting them, because they're able to get away from the screen temporarily, do what you ask them to do, and you can regroup. So that's an absolute thing to think about, because Zoom fatigue is real. Stacy. Thank you, Amy. I think it was Amy. Yeah, thank you, Amy.
I actually have very little experience, but I had an observation and a question. During the first week and a half of my internship, so I'm still student teaching, the school was on virtual, and it was high school, and 99% of the students were little Skittles dots. Their camera was off, they didn't participate. I'm guessing a lot of them either went back to sleep or were playing games on their phones. And I didn't know if you had any thoughts now that most every service, whether it's Google Meets or Zoom or Skype, has background, cover. Because I understand the privacy issues. If you've got any thoughts about having kids turn their cameras on so that you are sort of forced to engage and pay some bit of attention to what's going on.
Yeah, Stacy, great question. And here's the problem. Each county has, and again, I have to kind of go to the county because I don't want to get you all in trouble. But it really is up to the policy of the county. Some counties, require them to have their cameras on. Some require them to have their, they require the student option. You get to make a choice. Ways around that is if they can blur their background, they're more than welcome to blur their background, or you can even ask them, hey, listen, if you're uncomfortable or something like that, you can set up your own station. It's not, now that there's not quite as much virtual, it's not, people aren't thinking about it, but you have to realize is that, people might not have the most stablest of homes. They may not have the greatest environment for learning. So we have to be cognizant of that. The biggest strategy I can say is that even just checking in temporarily for 30 seconds is that good, almost like a health check, I guess is the best way, trying to get them to participate. But of course, you're going to have to always go back to what your county mandates, because again, you do work for somebody. So I don't want to give you, but anytime you can make that social connection, it's always suggested. And here's the thing too, you can also reach out and make those offline connections too. You can just send an email or message or just something that's meaningful. We don't want to keep on giving them just canned responses. In fact, when it was the pandemic, I'll tell you this, is that the schools tried their best to communicate everything because they really wanted to try to keep people in the loop. But a lot of times they're just messages. It's just a wash in the sea of one. If you are sending a message, an individual message to that student, trying to make that connection, it's a better chance of making that type of connection. If you're just sending even a personalized email to them, it doesn't have to be long, but just saying, hey, listen, I'm just checking in. I want to make sure everything's okay with you. I haven't seen you turn on your screen. It's my goal to have you interested in this class to where you want to turn on your screen and participate. And a lot of times they'll share with you what's going on. So you can make those types of, you can make those type of connections. I know there's a lot of issues when it comes to access and the digital divide. These are still struggles that we're kind of dealing with. So I get it. Thank you very much for everybody that shared. This is a very good, I want to say a very good chat time. So I appreciate it because you gave me a break to actually, practice what I try to preach, and that is trying to get you all to share your wealth of knowledge. And this is what you really need to do during these sessions and environment. You really need to become what I call a community of practice, where you share these different ideas and pieces of advice and strategies. You all cannot work in silos. You have to work, you're in this together. So if anytime you can kind of give big ideas to each of you, you should. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on because I have a lot more strategies, but I do promise you I'll give you more times to talk in just a minute. If I can get there I go. My mouse is starting to run out of battery. Okay. So more strategies. As educators, we have to understand that this is the digital generations we are teaching. As our generation was paper and pencil trained, this generation is light and sound trained. Inherently, humans are all visual learners. We process information visually 60,000 times faster than we do text. Images, songs, slideshows, and video clips are excellent resources to share in a classroom, at a distance. And of course, if they're also face-to-face, same strategy. You can share these things in a classroom as well, or in a blended environment. Any way, these strategies will work. John Medina, who's a molecular biologist, he states that people can remember the content of more than 2,500 pictures with at least 90% accuracy 72 hours after exposure. So even though the subject only sees each of these pictures for about 10 seconds. So let me repeat this. There's a 90% recall of the content of 2,500 images, 72 hours after exposure with only 10 seconds of exposure. Recall rates 1 year later of those same 2,500 pictures is still an impressive 63% of the content of those 2,500 pictures. But the same research states that when new information is presented orally with no image present, for example, if I made this presentation without including a visual element, 72 hours later, you, the audience, would only be able to recall about 10% of what was presented 72 hours previously. After just 72 hours, students will remember only about 10% of the content of your lecture. Medina says that this is a clear evidence that the traditional stand and deliver lecture method is not effective. However, and this is very significant, the percentage of information retained goes up from 10% to 65% if an image is added to the new content. Let me explain what's happening here. Since childhood, the digital generations have been continuously bombarded by television, videos, and computer games that put colorful, high quality, highly expressive and realistic graphics and sounds in front of students with little or no accompanying text. As a result, the digital generation use these images. They're powerful enough on their own to communicate the message to and for them. And for the younger generations, the role of words increasingly is merely to complement the images. The result of this pervasive and chronic digital bombardment has been to sharpen the digital generation's visual abilities. The digital generations are a visually literate generation, so bathed in bits that they think it's a natural part of their digital landscape. They're completely comfortable seeing and conveying information in visual formats. We learned from books. We were trained to communicate primarily with words. Learning was linear, logical, left to right, top to bottom, beginning to end. Conversely, the digital generations, as I said before, are light and sound trained, which is a completely different cognitive process than the older generations use. So what implications does this hold for education and for educators? The young generations are growing up in the YouTube era. They're completely immersed in a world of full motion video that they watch for entertainment and they learn from. They also create and share their own videos. In less than a generation, this has allowed students to move from simply being consumers of media to being what I call prosumers, who simultaneously consume and produce their own media. Amongst the younger generations, visual communication is increasingly challenging the supremacy of traditional reading and writing. Although traditional reading and writing aren't going anywhere anytime soon, the digital generations are more likely to express their ideas using simulations or video as they would be for writing an expository essay. Some strategies to employ in distance learning include share previewed video clips with students. Now, this is important. You don't want to just start sharing clips that are really long. I would keep clips short, relatively 2 to 5 minutes. Could somebody please mute? The wonders of Zoom. So try to keep them 2 to 5 minutes. Any longer than that, again, their attention span will change also. Okay, so as much as they're after 5 minutes, they're starting to lose their attention with you being a talking head. They tend to also lose it when it comes to videos that are more than 5 minutes long. Now, I'm not saying that you can't show a 10 or 15-minute video, but you want to break it apart with processing time, or you want to break it apart with question and answer sessions. Try and deliver good video content to them, they'll love it. And they'll also get a lot from it. Record narration for books, instructional directions, or feedback. By recording this, if they miss something, if they're absent, you can share these types of narration with them. If you have special education students, they'll appreciate recorded directions because they can go back and listen to them again. They may just want to listen to a wonderful voice read them a book. So there's all these different ways that you can, diversify how you reach your students and how you give them information to process. Add images to instructional resources to draw their eye. Make sure they are high resolution images. Don't try and incorporate pixelated pictures or black and white. They just don't like them as much. They really want high quality images. Monitor color use, font size, and the amount of text on resources you share. Especially with special education, they try to limit the amount of text that they put on pages, because too much text on a page will make it, they might put up a barrier in trying to process the information, or they may get distracted. You want to try and I'll talk a little bit more about just everybody when it comes to the digital generation and how they read, because they do read differently. Use images to introduce new topics, subjects, and ideas. I used to use a lot of slideshows to kind of give them ideas as we would go. Use digital segments, video segments, as I mentioned before. Encourage learners to record, edit, and publish their own videos. They truly do love to be, they really do like to be a part of their own show. So what happens when students own their learning? They become problem solvers. They develop growth mindsets. They learn to experiment and tinker. They develop creativity. They practice divergent thinking. They cultivate geeky interests. They chase their passions. When a student gets to make a choice, they have a voice in their learning. After they leave your classroom, they will remember the freedom and value you placed in them. They will develop into lifelong learners because you gave them a choice. You gave them an option. Yep. Everybody's just still putting up a lot of good ideas in the chat. I'll make sure to share that. One thing that was really popular during the pandemic and still being used quite a bit today is choice boards. Choice boards provide students with the power to choose how to learn a particular subject or concept. This freedom encourages them to be more responsible, accountable, and independent in their learning. It also allows them to work on the activities at their own pace. The boards are useful for teachers as it enables them to identify and use student interests and preferences to stimulate active learning and student engagement. You can make a choice board on anything, on reading, on science, on social studies. I've seen wonderful ones from physical education and health. Anytime you can put these resources and put these links in them, they will truly love them. And again, after they're done the choice board, try and get them to somehow demonstrate their understanding and their learning through creating some sort of really cool educational artifact. If you go online and look up choice boards, you'll find tons of them on YouTube. You'll find tons of them just by doing a quick Google search. You can look for teacher pay teachers over the course. That's a resource that you'll buy. So I always suggest you look for things for free. And also Pinterest is a great place for choice boards. So go ahead and take a look and just do a search on Pinterest for choice boards. They'll give you lots of different ideas and a lot of different examples. And of course, you can make your own choice boards for your students. And they will truly appreciate that you gave them some of their own control, autonomy, and empowerment to do their own, to choose their own things. Zoom Meets and Teams allows video sessions moderators to break students up into small teams. Many school systems are worked up about adults needing to monitor these small groups as they work. I frame their concerns in this light. Can you hear every conversation spoken in your classroom at the same time? No, you can't. Breakout rooms allow educators the ability for students to work collaboratively online in their own small meeting place. Educators could even join the breakout rooms to check in with each team, monitor progress, and safeguard students. We might as well use these tools in the way that they're trusted. In higher education, they're used all the time. We can use breakout rooms right now. It's just, we need to just teach them. It's just like driving a car. We have to teach them how to drive a car. I'm not going to give my 15-year-old keys to my car without teaching them how to drive. That's exactly what you need to do with technology and breakout rooms like this, is you have to teach them how to use the breakout rooms productively, safely, and morally. So breakout rooms can be used for think, pair, share, for warm-up discussions, for exit discussions, for peer review sessions, for games, for virtual station work, where each group is doing something different until they switch tasks. So the breakout rooms are great. I'm not saying you have to use them every single session, but the students do enjoy working together and working with others. Teacher toolkit, okay? Students, you've always probably heard this one. Write a paragraph to explain why the United States fought the Civil War. The write a paragraph directive is up there with pop quiz and popularity. Write a paragraph, repeat after me, complete problems 1 through 4. If students complete these tasks, then they have demonstrated they can follow procedural directions, not newly acquired knowledge. Educators must diversify their teacher toolkit and stay out of the assignment rut. I call it the assignment rut. Right here is a list of 100 ways students can express their learning. Many can be performed during distance or hybrid learning, or they can even be done in a face-to-face classroom. Now, I'm not going to force you to write these all down. What I'll do is, after I'm done with this presentation, I'll also share some of these takeaways, so this way you can use them for your classroom. Some ideas: you could get students to create advertisements, audio recordings, choice boards, as I mentioned before. They could create cartoons or comic strips. They could do dioramas. You could help them to create they could do their own escape rooms, create magazines, participate in literature circles. They could develop their own mobiles or models. They could do a puppet show, a public service announcement. They could do story maps, speeches, Socratic seminars. They could develop and produce their own TED Talks. They could do, slideshows, scavenger hunts, podcasts. There's tons of different ways that you can get students to express what they've learned. And you kind of get out of that rut of write a paragraph. Where's the relevance in telling somebody to write a paragraph? You're just showing your power as an educator, that you have a power over the students. But if you get them to pick what they want to do, they're going to get the buy-in. They're going to feel the commitment. They're going to feel the ownership of what they've developed for you. They're going to construct something that's useful, that they're going to love, and they're going to be proud of to share with you and their classmates. So don't worry, I will share this big list afterwards. Feedback, change feedback into feed forward. And what I mean by this, as incredible as educators are, they cannot always provide timely, precise, and constructive feedback to their students. With class sizes of 20, 25, or even 30 students, it is challenging to stop the world. Lock eyes with a student and have a one-on-one conversation about their performance, feelings, and ideas. This has got to stop. At a distance, it is absolutely possible to give effective feedback to each student. In fact, now that you're in a classroom, you can do that. Even if it's simple and short, you can do it. During online meetings, strategically plan times to share with everyone the strengths and good performances of each student. We used to do a lot of this on good work boards or something like that. Even if you make announcements, or I'm going to show you a quick thing where a lot of people, whether in face-to-face or they're on online synchronous sessions, they create what I call a housekeeping slide, which is kind of like the introduction PowerPoint slide. I'll show you an example of one. You can share people that have done just incredible work, or they did something to where they like this type of feedback. They want to see their name up there, trying to find ways to have them share their names, or they get that type of personalized feedback and recognition. They love that. This is a generation that loves instant feedback and that type of instant gratification. Help them cultivate the ways in which they can also do peer feedback, where they can kind of talk about what's good about something, what's bad about something. When you get students to become really good at peer feedback, it's almost like you have 20 other teachers in the room with you. So try and get them to cultivate this type of professional atmosphere where they can provide peer review. And then of also that peer review will then also become self-review, where they can actually know what they're doing. So you can play review games on sites that provide that type of instant feedback. There's Kahoot, and was it Blockit? Yeah, Blockit. There's Socrative. Socrative is one. There's Seesaw is another. There's plenty on a Pear Deck will let you do it, where you can kind of get that instant real-time feedback. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. This is going to be probably my last opening little section before ideas, questions, reflections, anything. Go ahead, please unmute and go ahead and feel free to talk. I know there's 50 some of you, so please share. Is there an idea that kind of that you find intriguing or interesting, that's something that you're going to take into your own teacher toolkit? Is there like something that came up that you reflected, or maybe you're making a connection back to your classroom, an idea in which you want to share? And again, if you don't feel like speaking, you're more than welcome to put it in the chat box. I've been reading what's been going up in there.
I had a comment, like I noticed that there are like different people who are, I know technology is important, but there are different situations where technology is not always like readily available for some teachers. Like where I teach in particular, it's a nonprofit organization and we don't have a smart board, and we literally have to do the best that we can in order to incorporate a lot of technology into the classrooms. I know that that doesn't mean that we cannot incorporate some technology, but I find myself having to kind of compensate for interest in this generation, because I teach high school English, like try to compensate to keep their interest with minimum technology. So I like the idea that you had about the pictures and what they visibly see. So I find myself, even though we have just a whiteboard, like making visuals on the board or just writing it on the board actually helps them to visualize and actually see it. Like when we go over our Shakespeare for the last quarter, I don't have like, a way to show them a video all the time about different things that I want to show them, but I've even printed off black and white pictures and showed them. I've even done an art gallery and showed lots of pictures through my art gallery. But again, like I guess what I'm saying is it's important not to just forget about the traditional way of doing things when you can't really incorporate a lot of technology. And another thing that I found that works is during remote, I was more comfortable. I'm not as comfortable standing in front of a classroom and talking in front of a lot of people than I would be during remote. And like, I try not to forget that my personality still can show through the screen, because sometimes it's just like, oh, will the students like me? I know that was my biggest thing during the pandemic. Like, how will they get to know me as a person without me physically being there to show them that, eye contact, that just that genuine care that they can, identify with. And I don't know, I just guess it just automatically showed through the screen after a while. And some of the kids were like, oh, we can tell that she loves us. They would send me hearts and stuff through Zoom. So like, that's what I care about, whether or not I can make like meaningful connections with my students, even without all the bells and whistles, because sometimes it's hard if you don't have them.
Then, and here's the thing too, is that choice board, a lot of these things are, and I'm giving you the strategies, are high tech, low tech, no tech types of experiences. You can do a lot of these without technology. When it comes to, let's say, okay, just taking an example, creating a video, you're like, oh, okay, well, you need technology for that. Well, actually, if you do a skit or have them do a play, they don't need to have technology for that. They can act it out. Now, if they're virtual, obviously, that's a completely different situation. But there are ways to make things that are, you can absolutely go to kind of like that teacher toolkit and find ways to do it to where it's high tech, low tech, no tech. So even no matter what type of experiences you have, because I'm the first to admit that, first off, I did say digital is different, and I'm not always saying that digital is the best. I agree. I don't want you to go and use a whiteboard as a $7,000 chalkboard. It should be done for some sort of higher level application. It should be done for them to collaborate and communicate and do all these different critical thinking. I'm not a proponent of using technology for technology's sake. So I agree with you 100% on that. We need to be strategic in how we use technology with our learners. And even if you have a low tech solution, a lot of times it can make very powerful connections with your learners. So I suggest always just being strategic in how you use technology with your learners. So I only have a couple more minutes, and again, thank you very much. Again, the participation is just fantastic. I really do appreciate the kind of like the group and how you all are just continuing on. So let me do a couple things. So something that really kind of benefits everybody, whether you're doing face-to-face or you're doing an online session, is a lot of people really developed what I call these types of housekeeping slides. And what they are is basically they want to put content they almost put it onto a PowerPoint. Now, if you're not a big fan of PowerPoint, that's fine. You don't have to be. But a lot of times when people were online, they needed a structured way of sharing content. If you had a student whose internet went out that day, they kind of needed to know what was going on, or if you need kind of something, a lot of times they would start with what I call these housekeeping slides, where it might have a list of to-do or learning objectives or quote of the day, or embedded video that you want to share, the date, or even as you go through and you do these kind of like to-do lists. A housekeeping slide is something you may want to consider. Now, one that I found, let me give you one right here and you can take it, is slidesmania.com/education. I found like 20 or 30 different ones of these housekeeping slides. And what you do is you just import the content into it. It's kind of like a template to where you can put content into it, learn how to use it. That's a possibility if you really kind of want to keep things structured and together. That's something that you can do. I found this to be really useful, and teachers really like these types of housekeeping slides. Where they're and again, it's not just one slide. You can then go and add other slides if you want to share information with them. So again, it's slidesmania.com/education. I'll make sure to share this resource with you after the presentation, so you don't have to write it down. So again, housekeeping slides can include just about anything helpful for students and parents. You can send it to students that might have missed class. This idea can work for distance, hybrid, and face-to-face classes. It can also be emailed to a parent as a resource if needed. If the parent's just like, well, I need to really know what's going on with my student, we're like, you know what, this is pretty helpful right here. So that's an idea. I'm going to kind of fast forward a little bit because it's just about 7 o'clock now. But what I want to do is I want to say the traditional classroom is not enough for kids today. The digital generations will never accept the traditional stand and deliver educational model. They need to be in a situation where they're controlling some things, and that can never happen in a traditional school environment. Why in the world am I learning this? You have to help them answer this question. Why are you teaching this to me? What's the relevance of this? You have to help them make this type of connection. Okay, to be an effective 21st century teacher, we must first possess the very same 21st century skills that our students are expected to have. And in addition to those skills, we must be able to help all of our students obtain and develop 21st century skills. Look, I spent many years in the classroom. Anybody who knows anything about anything knows that the secret to success in the classroom has very little to do with being a good disciplinarian or a good classroom manager, and everything to do with creating an engaging methodology that compels students to want to be there. It's not about making students learn, it's about getting them to want to learn. Without motivation, there will be no learning. Ask yourself this question: would students be in your classroom if they didn't have to be there? Education in the 21st century needs to be about full body learning. The killer app and best one-to-one device for the 21st century learner is a good teacher, a teacher with a love of learning, an appreciation of the aesthetic, the esoteric, the ethical, and the moral. A teacher who understands Bloom's taxonomy or Gardner's multiple intelligences or Fieri or Piaget or Papert, all these important learning theorists, who knows how different kids learn at different times and at different rates. Today's learners are not the same learners that schools were originally designed for. And today's learners are certainly not the learners that many of today's educators were trained to teach. Beyond this, it's crazy to think that over 2 decades into the 21st century, we're still debating what 21st century learning looks like. Education continues to operate on assumptions about teaching, learning, assessment that are targeted at students from another age that has passed us by. The world has changed in the past 20 years, and it continues to change at a faster and faster rate. COVID-19 demonstrated this point. So in the same way that we have every right to expect the digital generations to respect, understand, and engage with our world and our values, we absolutely also need to take the time and effort to respect, understand, and engage with their world and their values, okay? And this is a balancing act, okay? It's a balancing act between our world and theirs, between the traditional and digital learning environments. As you leave the session today, the fundamental question you need to be asking is how have you modified your instructional assumptions and practice to address the fact that kids have fundamentally changed and continue to change. There's nothing stopping us from changing the way we learn and how we teach. I know it's hard, but remember this, that the kids are absolutely worth it. And again, I want to thank everybody for participating tonight. Again, I apologize that I couldn't go the full 75 minutes that I had to get going. You know, I appreciate everything that you're doing. I know that you're working to the best of your abilities. Please don't get burned out. Make sure you have time for yourself. I'll make sure as a follow-up that I send my materials out to Jean Marie. So this way that you can, you know, because I know I had to kind of go through a lot of this fast. So this way you can go ahead and take a look at it. I'll also make sure to put the recording up on YouTube. So this way you can watch it. And if I went too fast, you can obviously go back and watch it again. So
great plan, Ryan. Thank you. Lots of thank yous going on. Go be a dad. I can stay on with anybody that has questions about anything about the session tonight or your chalk and wire assignments or your internship assignments or your research projects. If not, please go and enjoy the evening. Logan, stay on and I'm happy. Oh, yeah, please.
I made
go ahead.
Marie, I made you the host. So this way you're now the owner of this. So I'll make sure that makes its way to you. I'll make sure to give you the resources by tomorrow. So this way you can send it out to all the crew here. Okay.
That's perfect. Thank you, Ryan. And we already have everyone's attendance. If you were just a phone number, you might let us know your name, but I think we even reached out to people with phone numbers. So we're good there. Everybody's attendance. Yeah, we had 55. Thank you, Ryan. Talk to you tomorrow.
Yep. Everybody be safe and thank you for all your hard work. Okay.
Thank
if you ever need anything, just reach out to me.
Yep. Only an email away.
Yep.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
And I'm assuming if we didn't hear from you, we're good attendance wise.
Absolutely. Mackenzie,
Okay, thank you.
Yep, because you have your name on the screen. That's what we used.